And good morning, everybody. We're alive. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another week of fantastic food safety, food quality, amazing products getting out in there, feeding everybody's family and making us happy. And if nobody else says it this week, Brian and I are going to say it to you here today. Thank you. We appreciate it. We really, really appreciate all the hard work you do. If you're new to the chat, welcome. Pull up a chair. My name is Brian Armitrout with the Food Leadership Group. And every Friday at 8 a.m., 10 a.m. Mountain Time, we live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we bring an amazing guest on, and we have a chat. And what you'll notice here is this is not a lecture. This is not a bunch of presentations you get at a conference. This is meant to be a discussion. And that is the funnest, maybe, is that a word? The funnest part of our discussions here is your input. So please let us know what you're thinking in the comments, and we'll weave those into the conversation here today. So one of the things that I love having on the chat is new faces and new perspectives. And today I have on Brian Neal with Eurofins. He's the technical manager over there. How you doing, Brian?
Good. Thanks, Brian, for having me.
Oh, you bet. And one of the things we do here on the chat, Brian, is we kind of give everybody an update on where they're at in the world. It's always amazing where people are at. And as people start filing in here for the chat this morning, they'll put in the comments where they're at. So I'm in Loveland, Colorado, where if you're watching the news at all, we've got four forest fires going on currently. The biggest one, and the one that started first, the Alexander Mountain Fire, is just west of where I live. And we got pretty close to getting to the voluntary evacuation area. And if you step outside here in the morning, Brian, wow. It smells like a campfire outside for sure. But I think we're okay now. So hopefully the winds will be okay and nothing else will happen. So it's staying in a remote area, not a lot of people. So that's always a good thing. Yeah. So where are you at, Brian?
I live in a small town just south of Fort Worth, Texas, called Godley, Texas. There's nothing much exciting going on here. It's a growing town, a population of about 2,000 folks. Moved here about 9 years ago, and it's population 900. So I guess it's growing pretty rapidly for that. That goes. I live here with my family. I got 3 kiddos. I got two guinea pigs, a rabbit, a dog, and fixing to be a new goat to the family, just as we kind of look for one this weekend. But yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Nice. Well, it's kind of an amazing thing as you mature in life, and you realize that, living in a big city, not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, for sure.
And in what we do, being relatively close to a big city is important because you got to get to the airport every now and then. But that quality of life you get in the more rural area is amazing. So I'm jealous. That's a cool place. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So good morning, Sean, and on Ontario. I see here your PCQI and your SQF. So I think our conversation here today is going to be of particular interest to you. Maureen, good to see you as well in Minneapolis. The other thing here in Colorado, very hot. It's been the upper 90s for most of the week. So for our people outside of the U.S., 36, 37 degrees. So quite warm, which doesn't help the fires for sure. So one of the things that we love to do on the chat here as we get started, everybody, is join us for a ceremonial drink of your favorite beverage. Lift your mugs and join us. Cheers. I like the red cup. I think I've got one just like that. My wife always rolls her eyes. We have these nice, French glasses for drinking water. And nope, I've got my red plastic cup. That's
all I use. These plastic cups. They're easy I drop them. They don't break. Whatever. So yeah.
Exactly. They're very practical. So good morning, Wanda. And Wanda had a big announcement here recently on LinkedIn. Congratulations, Wanda. If you want to share with the group, I'll leave that to you, but I'm very jealous. So good job. One of the things that we love to do on the chat here as well, and this is how I torture my guests, is we tell a dad joke. So Brian, what brand of underwear do scientists wear?
I have no idea.
Calvin Klein.
Calvin Klein. I don't know if I should laugh or not.
Probably not, but I'll laugh for everybody. Everybody's groaning right now, including Tim. Yes, so Wanda is retired, so congratulations. But Wanda, like me, has been in the food industry for quite a while, so I'm sure she's going to be doing things to helping out people as well. So best of luck to you on the next chapter, Wanda. Anything that we can do to help, happy to do it. So diving in here, Brian, one of the traditions, assuming I can speak here on the chat, is kind of giving everybody a background on new guests. So why don't you kind of tell everybody about you and your career, that side of things. We've got a really good picture of your home life, which is awesome. So what do you do and how did you get started in it?
Yeah, so currently I'm, as Brian said, and just to be clear, my name is Brian with an I, which is the correct way to spell it.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry about that. But as we get into it, so I'm technical manager for Eurofins Food Assurance. I've been with Eurofins for almost 5 years. Sorry, 5 years. It'll be 5 years in September. Prior to me being at Eurofins, I was with another certification body doing the pretty much exact same role. Mm-hmm. And before that, I worked 10 years in a manufacturing setting and meats, veggies, things like that. So what I do as a technical manager is it's a lot. It's just one of those, it's like the QA manager in plants. You kind of get stuck with a lot of things. But so the main function is I manage the audit programs. When like SQF and BRC, whenever they have a new version of their standard, for example, come up, I make sure auditors are trained on those standards. They're calibrated. We have all the new checklists in place. I work with the program owners to just make sure we're doing what we need to do. If there's anything, if I have any questions, I go to them directly. I qualify new auditors. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into being a technical manager. But yeah, I really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Brian's being a little self-deprecating here because his skill set is something that is extremely rare and very valuable in the food industry. Brian is one of those, and hopefully I don't embarrass you too much here, but he's one of those go-to experts. So the technical manager is essentially for the different certification bodies. We'll kind of go through how all these things work, and that's kind of what we wanted to focus on here today, is he's the go-to expert. So what does SQF say for a particular topic when they're talking about, let's say, document control or something like this? But not only does he have to understand it for SQF, he also has to understand it for all the other standards that are being certified through that particular certification body. So BRC, FSSC, all of the different standards, he's got to be up to speed on those of not only what is currently being managed through the standard and what the current version is, but also what's coming up. So for example, SQF is getting ready for version 10. And he's, I'm sure, very involved then with Leanne and the team over there as part of the technical groups that help to create the standards as well. So he's one of the people out there who are really shaping the future relative to how third-party audits go. So I've worked with you in the past before, and your knowledge is amazing. And it's something that really keeps the wheels on the bus as you're moving through these type of things. So thanks for all you do, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I enjoy it quite a lot, what I do. Like I said, I'm also a food safety auditor. So I audit these different programs as well and go and visit. You find folks in your facilities and look at kind of some of the processes. So I enjoy what I do. I really do.
Yeah, it's a very cool role. Yeah. And so part of what we do, and this is the same with every industry, is you've got jargon and lingo. And in the certification world, there's certain jargon and lingo that we use there that you may not be familiar with. So we've already thrown some of those in here. So I wanted to kind of go through those and ask what those different things are. So first off, what is a certification body and how does that differ from a scheme owner or someone who has a standard?
Yeah, so we'll go back. So certification body is a body like Eurofins or whoever that deliver a set of audits against different programs. Those programs are from the scheme owner or program owner. Now they like to be called program owner because they don't like the people who think they're scheming things up on them. But yeah, so a certification body, we have all these different programs that we audit against, certification programs, SQF, BRC, FSSC. We have some second party like GMP type stuff we audit against, where we come into your facility. We take that audit tool to whatever standard it's against. We check your systems with that audit tool. see, first we look for compliance, see where you're compliant at. And along the way, if we unfortunately see non-compliance, we identify those as well as learning opportunities for everyone, of course. Where the program owner, the scheme owner, they develop those programs like SQF, like I said. They develop that standard, that code, which is to be implemented by you guys, by the facilities who manufacture all these foods and different things. And then that's where the certification. So it's just one big circle, how it all works out.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah. So part of this as well is, and you had touched on this because there's also, and we'll get a little bit more into this side of this, how this works as well, but I at least wanted to bring this up at this point, is we also hear, Brian, about accredited versus non-accredited audits. What are those?
Yeah, so accredited, non-accredited. So accredited, when we say, a lot of times you'll hear me say accredited if you ever talk to me on the phone, and that's accreditation. So there are certain programs which require accreditation. What accreditation is we have bodies, like certification bodies, that regulate and manage the certification bodies. So we audit manufacturing sites, and then we get audited or assessed, is like they like to call them assessments. We get assessed or audited by accreditation bodies. So you got this governance body on the top, accreditation body. What they do is they come in, they check our processes, just like when we audit facilities. They make sure we have processes in place to manage the audit program. We check to make sure we're compliant with the requirements of those programs, and also compliant with the requirements within ISO, these ISO documents like 17065, 17021. Labs are accredited under 17025. So they make sure that we meet the requirements and those things. And if not, we get nonconformances as well. And we have to follow the same kind of guidelines that we expect of our clients. So everybody is being watched by somebody and kind of keeping, holding people accountable, if you will.
Right. Yeah. So they're auditing the auditors is the easiest way to think about it.
Correct. Yeah.
So the big difference for this, so everybody's kind of clear on this, is so I could go out and create a standard. I could call it Brian's audit standard, and I'm going to come into your plant and look at all these different things and give you an audit score, but it's not being audited by another accreditation body. So it's an unaccredited audit, meaning that, okay, it's fine, but it's really not at that high level of clarity and transparency. So we'll use the example of the Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI. They have a criteria set of standards that they say, okay, if you want to be recognized by us, you need to follow these rules. And then a certification body, I'm not a certification body, but a standard owner will then say, okay, I'm at SQF and I want to be compliant with what they're doing. And so I'll create my audit to that. And then they'll become accredited. So a third party group will come in. So ANSI or Jazz Hands, these other independent groups to audit compliance to that. The certification bodies are the people who actually have the boots on the ground. So as Brian was talking about earlier, Brian is then hiring auditors, working with the team at Eurofins to set up audits in this particular example, like for SQF, and then they go out and execute those. And there's all these different links in this chain. And so part of what we wanted to kind of show here today is all of the gears and the wheels behind the curtain that most people don't see, right, Brian? Because normally if you're a food plant, right, you pick up the phone and you call Eurofins and you say, hey, I'd like to schedule an audit. And then a bunch of questions start and you don't see all this stuff, do you?
No, that's a good point. And yeah, thanks for bringing up the unaccredited stuff I left off the end there. But yeah, there is quite a lot. I know we have schedulers that most folks talk to, and that's all they talk to. But there's still a lot, like you said, behind the curtains. When you pull that curtain back, there's a lot of things going on in the background to kind of keep this ship going, so we can deliver that exceptional audit to you and get that certificate to you on time. So all these things kind of happen the way they need to happen. So, but it's all, none of it would be possible without, the wonderful facilities we do audit. So we're very grateful for those guys. But yeah, there is quite a lot that goes into the process.
Yeah. So for example, if I'm a food plant and I have a new customer, let's say that I want to sell to Costco, and Costco says, okay, well, you need to have an audit in order for us to approve you. And I'm just a little guy starting out. I'm like, oh, crap, I need an audit. So then I'll call Eurofins and start talking with the customer service team and start looking at scheduling that audit. And a lot of times, I'm sure you hear this quite a bit from the team, Brian, and it makes you smile because people will call up and say, hey, I want to start selling to this particular customer and they need to have an accredited audit. Can you do that next week?
Yeah.
No, no, that cannot be done next week. A lot of times, normally, Brian, what's the normal, pushing out into the future? What's the normal time between asking for an audit and getting it scheduled and on the calendar?
Yeah. So right now we're booking about 6 months out, 6 months to a year out. We do have those certain special occasions where somebody calls and, they say, I really need this in, September. I really need this at the end of August. We will check availability and see who we have to do that. And we usually can work it in. But yeah, we're booking, like I said, we're booking quite a ways out. So we're filling up these auditors' calendars, 6 months to a year out already. So it is difficult when we have a lot of people call up saying, I need this audit next week. Most times we can't make that happen, but there are certain occasions where we could, pull some strings to get it done. Yeah.
Yeah, where the stars happen to align, but definitely, and to kind of reemphasize that's a rarity. That if
Sure.
that happens, everything has to go perfect, and the chances of that happening 10, 20%, not very good. So don't count on that if you're wanting to schedule an audit for sure. Because another big piece of this, and Brian, you talked about this earlier, auditor calibration, and we'll talk about that here a little bit later. But this is another huge piece behind the scenes that I think people need to understand, which is auditor certification, right? So the auditors themselves are certified. So for example, if I wanted to come work for Brian as an auditor, I just can't call him up on the phone and say, hey, I want to start doing SQF audits next week.
Yeah.
Nope, doesn't work that way. So I have to submit my credentials and I have to show my qualifications and explain to them through a very rigorous set of rules what my qualifications are. So my main background is beverage and dairy. Can I go audit meat companies? No, I have no experience in meat companies. And as a supplier of meat products wanting to have an audit, I wouldn't want me in that plant because I don't know anything about it. And every industry is very unique. So you have what they call food sector categories, right, Brian?
That's right. Yep. So food sector categories are different categories. And in these accredited standards we talked about, it's all based off of the GFSI category. So, and GFSI is based off of ISO, and it's, all kind of big revolving door there. But yeah, so there's categories that we qualify auditors against. Like Brian said, if you're meat and SQF, you might be category 8, for example. So, and if you're dairy, you'll be category 10. So it depends what experience you have, what knowledge you have is what you get approved in, not only for those GFSI or those accredited standards, but also, the unaccredited stuff we talk about, like a GMP audit or, something like that. There are still sets of requirements you must meet in order to be approved for those, and different sets of trainings that we put you through and qualification processes. So yeah, it's not as easy as coming over, starting tomorrow as doing audits. It takes some time to kind of get you up there, and it could take, 6 months to a year on a good day to get you to that SQF standard certification. Right. Yeah.
So if I came to Brian and wanted to be an auditor, I would have to take training, take different courses. And then in addition to that, I also have to have kind of like an airplane pilot. I have to have hours behind the wheel. Yeah. So I have to go out and perform audits. So one of the things that people a lot of times are confused about, Brian, is shadow audits. What's a shadow audit?
Yeah, so a shadow audit is where what we call a shadow audit, in Eurofins at least, is whenever there's a new person coming in that has zero auditing experience. Let's say that yesterday they worked at a company that bottled milk, as an example. They'll come in and they'll do all the trainings, trainings first, but then we send them with a seasoned auditor on different audits, and that could be 2 audits at a minimum, 3, 4, 5, 6, could be a number of different audits where they shadow different auditors. And they watch the process. They just sit back in the back and watch the process. They sit next to the auditor. They ask questions to the auditor. They don't get involved in the audit process itself, but they watch the auditor, what they look at, the process, maybe pick up a little bit of the auditing style. Whenever I first became an auditor 11 years ago, that's what I did. I spent a number of time audits, shadowing different, I think I shadowed 7 or 8 different auditors. And it helped me a lot develop where I am today, because I picked up on their style of auditing and kind of got to shape what I wanted mine to look like. But also I got to see what kind of questions they asked, what kind of things they looked at. So that's what we consider a shadow audit, when a new person comes in and just watches to kind of get familiar with the process.
Yeah, that's good, because I think a lot of times people are very scared by that. So I know, on the manufacturing side, it's somebody will say, okay, well, we're scheduled for audit. And then they'll say, okay, well, we're going to be sending in your auditor plus a person who's going to be doing a shadow audit. And then the plants are like, whoa, I don't want somebody else in the plant. But that's all it really is. It's just helping the auditors be evaluated and help them get better.
No, that's a good point, because there are some folks we reach out to, and it is nerve-wracking as it is, having an auditor come in and look at your systems and really check things out. And you hear about a second person coming in. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's good to remember that second person, if they say shadow auditor or witness auditor, they're not in there to be part of the audit team. They're not in there to audit you. They're in there either observing or auditing that auditor, if you will, if it's a witness audit. Yeah. So they're in there watching that person, not so much. They might, of course, they're going to be listening in and interacting with you if you're just small talking on breaks and things, but they aren't as part of the audit team.
Mm-hmm. And that brings up a really good point. And this is something that I think everybody needs to really understand very clearly. And this is kind of one of the main takeaways, if you're taking notes here from our conversation, is Brian had mentioned earlier something called auditor calibration. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we have different areas of auditor calibration. For example, Brian mentioned SQF is going to version 10 shortly. And when that happens, we will look at that. We will have an auditor calibration or an auditor training against that new version to make sure everybody's calibrated to that new version of the standard. Also, at least once a quarter, sometimes it's more often, we hold auditor calibration calls with our folks. And what that will do is we look at technical reviews. We look at the reports, all the audit reports come in. We do a technical review on those. We supply feedback to the auditors, and we take the biggest technical review issue we see for that last period, and we put them in this calibration call. The auditors go over it, tell them what it is, how to improve it, how to fix things. So it's all about keeping auditors up to date, trying to make sure auditors are being consistent when they're doing these audits. So that's all it's about. It's kind of keeping things moving down the right track.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to look at it. Because part of this, and this is the way I always think about it, is auditors are just like us. They're people, and they have good days, they have bad days. They have things that they like to focus on. There's other areas they don't emphasize as much. The goal of calibration, and it's a great word, is that we're trying to make sure auditors are performing a consistent experience relative to that standard, regardless of where they're going, so that they're reacting the same way. But again, they're human, so it's kind of hard. Lisa had a question here. Let me pop this up here for you, Brian, on the shadow. Is how can you coordinate the shadow experience? So I'll go ahead and let you take a crack at that.
Yeah, I guess trying to understand the coordinate the shadow experience. Do you mean as an auditor, a new auditor, or just as somebody interested in auditing? I guess is a good way to think about it. Lisa, if you could give us a little more clarification. Are you looking at this from the viewpoint of the auditor or the company that's being audited? So if you're a quality manager and you hear about that, is that what you're asking? If you could give us a little more clarification, I think that would help. Yeah, but I guess I'll talk a little bit while she's typing that in. So the coordination of a shadow audit, it's pretty simple. Now, of course, if you're an employee of Eurofins, you have a contract with Eurofins, it's really easy. If you're just an outside person, like I want to go and shadow a different company doing an audit at XYZ plant, I can't really do that because of confidentiality reasons and whatnot. Because at that point, I'm going in, I may be looking at a proprietary process that this company has in place. And if I don't have that confidentiality statement signed with that company, they're not going to let me in there and look at their process. And I, as a certification body, I probably wouldn't want that either. So we make sure that that person is either a contract auditor for us or is a full-time auditor, to be able to kind of go in and do these shadow audits. And at that point, we just reach out to the sites and say, hey, we got this audit coming up. We have this person that's going to tag along with them and do the shadow audit. And the site usually agrees to it and says, sure, I don't have a problem with it. Both people show up. I won't say both auditors because only one's really auditing. Both individuals show up to your facility, do the highs and hellos and opening meeting, and it just kind of, the process continues as normal. There's nothing really different in the process at all.
Yep. Yep. Duncan makes a good point here, because it can be a challenge sometimes, because that shadow auditor is there strictly to observe. He's the UN. Yeah. He's just back there. She's just back there taking notes. Yeah. And sometimes it can be hard, right? They're auditors and they want to jump in. So they're trained not to do that. So generally the people who perform shadow audits are, highly trained, very seasoned auditors who are helping the newbies, kind of get the best lay of the land relative to how to do a good audit.
Yeah.
So one of the points here, I think a lot of things that confuses people, Brian, is you'll hear two main terms, is auditing and consulting. And what's the difference between those two things?
Yeah, so it's a huge difference in the fact that auditors can't consult. Whenever we come into your facility and look at your processes and controls and whatnot you have in place. So auditing, what we do, it's similar to consulting, except for the key step at the end. So we both use a certain audit tool, being that the SQF checklist or audit tool or whoever, if it's one of your personal audit tools you have in place, programs you have in place. We take that standard, we go through it, look at your process and look for the conformance. And if we see non-conformance in there, and here's where it kind of gets different. The auditor will document that non-conformance and move on. And so they'll say how you do not meet the requirements of that particular section in the program, and they'll document that and go. They won't talk anymore about it unless you have questions to try to convince them you're right or you're conforming, for example. Where a consultant or a consulting firm will do that exact same thing. They'll find those gaps, but then they'll help you fix those gaps. They will help you provide a solution in order to stop that hole from existing to where you are compliant. Auditor cannot tell you how to fix it. Consultant will help you determine how to fix it. So that's the key differences between auditing and consulting.
That's a really good way to put it. And it's important as someone who is being audited to understand that difference and make sure that you're watching out for it, because auditors again are people as well, and they want to help. And sometimes they will accidentally go over that line a little bit, and that you don't want that to happen, because that can be, it isn't necessarily the case, but it can be a conflict of interest. So if I'm an auditor coming in to audit Brian's facility, I'm following a set of rules. It's like, okay, here's what SQF says. And my role as an auditor is to say, okay, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And show me the proof that you did it. That's it. If then I go a little bit farther and say, well, Brian, here's a really good way to do this instead of how you're doing it. I suggest you blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now I'm consulting. And you don't want that, because the worst case scenario, and this very, very rarely happens, it would be I come in to audit Brian and audit, and then I say, hey, Brian, you had some non-conformances here and some issues. I do consulting. I can come in and help you fix this for some extra money. That's a conflict of interest, because now that auditor is being biased by those potential consulting applications associated with that. And auditing companies, certification bodies work really, really hard to make sure that never happens. So with that, with the questions here, so Lisa's got a question. Looks like Brian's camera's catching up here a little bit. So Lisa, looking to understand how to build that audit long to conduct GFSI audits. So definitely, Brian, if you're interested in that application and type of work, Brian can definitely help out with that for sure. So let's see, look at the other comments here, Brian. Didn't an auditor back in the day offer a suggestion that went horribly wrong, and that's why they cannot offer their thoughts? I can't remember when. Probably so, Brian. That would definitely make sense where that would happen, and you can see why that would be a major, source of issues with those audits.
Hi, Brian. Sorry about that. My computer decided to restart in mid-sentence there, but I jumped on my phone real quick here, so I'm still live at least.
You're coming through just fine. You sound good. So we were just talking about the auditing versus consulting. So I think we're doing a good job on that. Okay. So part of the question I'm sure you get a lot as well, Brian, is okay, I had my audit, my customer's asking for the certificate. My goodness, why does, I just had the audit last week and I don't have my certificate. Why not? Why is it taking so long?
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, there's quite a lot that goes on behind the scenes once you have your audit. So you have your audit, let's say it ends today. At that point, we give the auditor 5 days, and that's calendar days, to get that finished report into us. And when I say into us, they send it to technical review. So there's a person that's been trained in reviewing audit reports against a particular standard. They look for different things that need to be in that report. If it's well written, if it's clear, if it's concise, everything looks very well documented. And then the tech reviewer has 3 days. Our KPIs are way lower than that, and we can talk about that if you want. But the tech reviewer has up to 3 days to get that tech review finished. Then at that point, there might be some back and forth if there's things that need to be fixed within the report between the auditor and the tech reviewer. So the goal is by day 10, we have a finished report kind of ready to go to the client. But at that point, we can't send it if you require corrective action. So all GFSI standards, accredited standards we talked about, require facilities to supply corrective actions with their findings. If you do a GMP audit, it doesn't, at that point, we don't require corrective actions. On day 10, you'll get your certificate and your final report. But if you require corrective actions, that depending on the standard, you have, 30 days, 28 days, again, depending on the program you're audited against, which could then add more duration, more time to that certificate issuance. Let's say that you have 30 days to do it. You get it to us on day 29. Now the auditor needs to review, and it goes back to tech review. So we have, up to 45 days, for example, on an SQF audit to get that to you. So there's a lot of things in motion there that has to happen perfectly in order for us to get that certificate and report back to you quickly. Just as a point of reference, right now Eurofins is sitting at about 31 days on average to get a final report certificate out to the client. So we're doing really well, and a lot of that is, accredited to the facilities getting things back to us quickly when we request corrective actions and things like that. So luckily it's going smoothly.
Good. Yeah. And so that's a reference back to what the certification bodies are audited to. So they're held to standards on turnaround time, reporting, getting the information back to the sources. All these things are measured behind the scenes. So part of this, and this is where the technical review, and this is kind of where that behind the curtain piece happens, is, so what Brian had said in there, I want to make sure everybody heard that, is what happens after the audit is complete. It's up to that facility and the auditor to close out the nonconformances. And until the nonconformances are closed, nothing happens. So for example, let's say the auditor comes into my plant and gives me a minor nonconformance for the warehouse is dirty and you guys need to clean the warehouse. Well, number one, that's a very poorly written nonconformance because I don't know what the auditor's talking about. What does he mean when he says clean the warehouse? So as the client, I don't understand what he's asking me to do. So they need to be very, very specific. And that's part of what Brian does in that technical review piece is he's looking at this as a as an objective viewer. So part of the standard with an audit is it needs to stand alone. You need to be able to read the audit as someone who wasn't there and go, oh, okay, I understand what the nonconformance is for this and why it didn't comply with this particular standard.
Yeah.
So it's going back and checking those things. So the auditor, let's say he reads through that And the plant doesn't quite understand. Said, well, all right, dirty warehouse. What do you mean by dirty warehouse? And he's like, oh, okay. And he's like, no, here's what I mean. And he would then clarify that and say, what I'm talking about is in Bay D2, behind the back walls, you have some damaged pallets and dirt and debris back there that needs to be cleaned out. So you've got a nice 18-inch clearance between the wall and your racks. Ah, okay, got it. And then the plant would go back and do that corrective action to fix that. And then the next step is to provide proof back to that auditor, right, Brian, that they did that work.
That's right. So, I mean, you brought up so many good points there, Brian, as far as proper report writing and non-conformance writing is, and that's one of the calibration points we talk about is I continuously talk about report writing, clear reports, and more so importantly is the non-conformances. When you leave a non-conformance, it needs to be very clear for that site whenever they read that non-conformance that you wrote down, what exactly the problem was for you, for the tech reviewer, for a client. A good example of that is an audit. I was doing a SQF surveillance audit for a company, and the auditor that went in there previously wasn't available to do it for whatever reason. So I had to go in there, and as part of what I do, first off, is I look at the previous non-conformances, make sure that they still have their corrective actions implemented and everything's still running as it should. And there were 5 or 6 of these non-conformances. I had no idea what the non-conforming situation was, so I just had to kind of move on. And I couldn't get a hold of the auditor, so it's very challenging. So that's part of the tech reviewer's job, is making sure that auditor is writing a clear report that describes what they are seeing, because they're the ones there. They have to paint the picture. If they don't paint the picture, then it's just going to be a mess down the road. So that's why they have to do it when they're there on site.
Exactly. That's a good point, Brian, because part of this is put yourself in the shoes of the auditor. So they're going around, they perform an audit, they're in a plant a couple of days, maybe a little bit longer. They do the audit, then they go on, and let's say then they go do another audit, and then they go back home. They have to keep straight in their head what they said for a particular audit and what was the non-conformance and what's the evidence associated with that, and keep all of that straight. And that can be a challenge. So it's very important for the auditors to have a quick turnaround on preparing that audit, because human minds are frail and we forget stuff and we change stuff around. Anybody who's talked with lawyers who are involved with deposing witnesses are terrible. Witnesses are terrible. Everybody doesn't make mistakes all the time. So it's the same thing here. So making sure that within that you're always following, and this goes back to the basics, blocking and tackling in quality. And it's the same in auditing as well. Plan, do, check, act. So what is the standard? What did you do to maintain that standard? What proof do you have to show me as an auditor that you're doing what you say that you're doing? And if there's a failure and you had a non-conformance, what actions are you taking to get that back on track? And if you follow plan, do, check, act, you're always going to be off. You're going to be doing really well.
Yeah, good point.
So Wanda made a very good point here as well, right? And this is important for the audit overall. And I like this because it kind of brings us back up to a higher level, right? So a good audit is when we learn something from the audit. And as a quality leader, I knew the weaknesses and hoped that those are covered off on. Absolutely true. So that's always a hallmark of a good auditor, is when they leave your plant is, my plant is better now because of this visit. And that's always the gold standard that we're shooting for in the auditing world.
That's one thing I continuously, again, the calibration point keeps coming up. I continuously talk about with auditors, not only auditors, but clients as well. It's all about continuous improvement and growth and learning opportunity for everyone, not just for the sites, the facilities we're in auditing. It's continuous improvement for them because you always want to get better. You always want to improve, but also for those auditors, because if you audited 15 years ago, if you haven't changed in 15 years, it's going to be an ugly situation for you as you kind of try to do your job. So it's always continuous improvement. We can always learn more new things, always learn more, always, grow that knowledge base that we have grown inside our head. So that's what it's all about at the end of the day, is continuous improvement. If we don't continuously improve, then we're going to fail eventually. So that's very key for me.
Absolutely. As Sean says here, Brian, is he does a lot of auditing, and loves a platform called Paperless. Allows me to write things down clearly, but also add pictures for further clarity. Nice. Thanks for that tip. I appreciate it. Yeah. The auditing industry is slowly being dragged into the 21st century, and we're getting better and better tools. And as we've all seen, if you've been on the receiving or even the auditing side of things, it's essentially been Excel spreadsheets for a long time, and we're doing a much better job now of being more efficient in getting that information. Well, it looks like I can see your camera, Brian. Let's give this a shot here.
Yeah.
Awesome. And let's see. So I'll keep your sound. Do you want the sound on? Okay, there we go.
I'm good. I killed my phone. Thank you.
Hey, there we go. Awesome. Good to see your face. So any comments on what Brian or what Sean was saying there, Brian?
No, I think we do have a lot of auditors that use different platforms to help them transcribe the reports if that's something they speak into. And then at that point, it types it all out for them and they can just convert that over to the audit report, which saves a lot of time. Because you're right, Brian. I'll do an audit today. I'll move to the next one tomorrow, and either I'll forget it or I'll get my wires crossed upstairs and I'll be in a meat plant one day and somebody packing apples the next day, and I'll start talking about apple flavored meat or something like that. So it's very important for you to get that stuff out as soon as you can, so you don't start getting all that kind of crossed up and mixed up.
Yeah, and two, I want to bring this up because I want people who are being audited to understand this as well. Is being an auditor is not an easy job.
Yeah,
you're on the road all the time, and if you're a good auditor, as you were talking about, Brian, you are booked. You are booked out years sometimes in advance, and you have these audits, and so you have to go out. And part of the challenge and part of what the home office is doing for scheduling audits is working with those auditors to have a rational schedule. So it's like, oh, hi, I'm an auditor. I'm going to be flying to Minnesota. And then the planners will say, oh, okay, Brian, that's great. We have 2 clients in the Minneapolis area that you can hit on this trip. Yeah. And so I'll go audit one, then I'll go audit the other, and then I'll fly back home. And part of that is you're on the road all the time. So have a little empathy for the auditors because, sometimes, they're coming to your plant. It's in the middle of North Dakota. It's winter. They've been fighting the snowstorm. They have a sick wife at home that they're worried about. Yeah. And they come in the audit, and it can be hard, right? So seeing things from their viewpoint sometimes can help with that as well, and understand that they're human too. But that calibration piece that we keep hammering home, those auditors are pros. And they still know that they have to deliver that consistent product and evaluate your plant fairly. So make sure that you kind of have that in the back of your mind relative to auditors too.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point. And one thing I always bring up on these auditor calls I have is take care of yourself first, because you're right. I mean, I've been auditing, left Sunday night in a place on Monday, get an airplane, go somewhere else Tuesday, and every day I was in a different airport. Traveling across the country, all these different fancy hotel rooms you get to see and different airplane seats you get to sit in. But I always tell them, take care of yourself first. So that's always make sure you have something to drink and eat in your bag. We all carry bags with this. When I get to the airport, the first thing I do is I buy 2 bottles of water and, a couple protein bars or something, just stick in my bag in case the plane gets stuck on the runway, because it's happened before. You're out there for 2 hours sitting on a plane and it's hot and everybody's complaining and you're sitting there with your snack and bottle of water, just happy as can be. Not saying it happens, but sometimes it might, where we're doing an audit and everybody gets busy and maybe we skip lunch or forget about lunch or want to work through lunch, so we have that snack to kind of keep our brain going. So I tell the auditor, take care of yourself first and then worry about kind of do the rest afterwards.
Right. So as a client, make life easier for the auditor. Make sure that they have clear directions to get to your plant. Yeah. Have a really good location set up where the auditor can work. Have everybody, and this is an important part, make sure that the plant is involved, because if the auditor, if the only person who shows up for the audit is the quality manager, and then at the end, the plant manager shows up and asks what the score is and starts fighting with the auditor to get a higher score, which is not a good thing to do. That's a bad course of action. make sure that the auditor is comfortable and has a good environment to work in, that they have all the cooperation that they need. And to your point, food. So auditors work on a rotating schedule. You can't audit a location more than 3 times in a row. And so you may get an auditor back, let's say for those, 3 audits in a row, 3 years, and you'll get to know that person a little bit more. So I remember an auditor I used to use in the past. He loved at Costco, there's like a little pretzel square that had peanut butter inside. And we had those for an opening audit with him. It was the first time that he had audited one of our plants. And the dude ate about half of the jar of those things. And so we made sure for every audit that we had food there that the auditor liked. And it made things more comfortable for the auditor. You're going to have a better audit experience because people are people. Make sure that you're taking care of your auditor.
Yeah, a lot of times you're right. I mean, I've been there before. I worked in the industry for 11 years. I knew how to do it. And I had drinks, I had coffee, I had food, I had snacks. I kept engaging with that auditor to keep them happy because, like they say in California, happy cow, happy cheese or whatever it is, happy auditor, happy audit. So, sometimes you get auditors, that's not the case, but you try to, as a site, and I'm not telling you as a certification body, but auditors like the attention, like to be taken care of. And I know we're in there providing a service for you. And that's at the end of the day, it's what it comes down to. And when I do audits, I don't expect any of that stuff. I treat everybody the same, which we should. So,
right. But yeah, I mean, it's just human nature. Be respectful, and you'll get respectful back. So part of this, and I wanted to give everybody this little hint of something that I always train my quality managers on. And this goes back to making sure that the scope is understood for the audit.
Yeah.
And it's helping the auditor get in the right frame of mind and make sure that things go according to the way that they should go. So I would say something like this, Brian, and we'll pretend that you're the auditor. As I would say, and let's say this is your second trip back to my plant. I would say, well, Mr. Neal, thank you for coming to our plant this week. We're really, really excited to have you here. We've done a ton of improvements to the plant since you were last here last year, and we're really looking forward to showing you all this information. Just to be clear, we're auditing our plant to SQF version 9, food sector category 17. If you have any suggestions outside of that, we'd love to hear them. Right. So what am I doing there in a very polite way?
Yeah. So you're pretty much making sure that I'm there doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's what I ask. If the site doesn't already say, a lot of times sites are very prepared and they'll say, yeah, thanks for doing our SQF audit against, FSC, whatever it may be. But I, as an auditor, and I tell auditors, confirm that scope. And the reason that even if you did it last year, things change from year to year. Mm-hmm. They may have added a category. They may have taken away a category. If they added a category, you need to make sure as an auditor, you're qualified to do that audit still. But also, as part of this that goes on in an opening meeting is not only just confirming the scope, but make sure they didn't forget about something. Maybe they supplied to a retailer, Amazon, Costco, McDonald's, something like that. And they don't know that they need to have that additional step involved with that additional audit. So just see if they do any of these things, if they need to add on any services. So that's the reason for that. So at the end of the audit, we're like, oh, we forgot about this, or oh, I didn't know about that. So make sure the scope of the audit is very clear. First thing.
That's a good point. I want to make sure that everybody caught that. Is certain retailers and other food like retail locations. So you had mentioned Costco, McDonald's. In addition to, let's say, SQF, they have what's known as an addendum. Yeah. So they say, all right, we want our suppliers to go through the standard audit. Plus, we've got an extra few other questions we want you to ask as well. That's the addendum. And so you need to make sure that that's covered in the scope, and that should be set up when the audit is scheduled, but sometimes it gets missed. So that's worst case scenario is you do the SQF audit, the addendum for Costco, let's say, gets missed, and now the auditor's got to come back and do that. Right? That's a waste of time.
Yeah, for sure. That's why, it's good to put that, of course, before the auditor even shows up, to work with the scheduling team and get that on the schedule. But also, if there's something you forgot about, make sure you mention all that stuff in the opening meeting, because it's easy to add a Costco audit onto an SQF audit. It's easy to do these things at that point, rather than at the end of the day, whenever, the auditor's heading out the door now, then it's a whole nother ball game. we have to come back and do a whole new audit. So that's why it's good to confirm the scope before the audit kind of happens.
Exactly. And so part of this as well is we'll give some more practical tips here as well. I think these are pretty helpful for people is don't go out to lunch, right? The auditor has an immense amount of material to get you in a very short period of time. Have food brought in, because during that eating of the food, the auditor's going to ask questions. He can start catching up on his documentation. Going out to lunch burns 2 hours, and auditors don't have time to do that. The other point here, and I think this is a good one that Cortland was making, is there's also ethical elements as well too. Know your audit, know your audience. So for example, there's very strict rules with FDA and CFIA regarding gifts. It's the same with auditors, right? That clouds the relationship. Now, ordering out lunch and bringing it into the plant so that you can have a working lunch with the auditor, there's no problem with that, right, Brian?
No, yeah, for sure. Of course, bribing your auditor is not good. It goes back to the whole ethical thing and trying to get a better score, like, slipping $100 under the table or dollar bill, whatever it may be, under the table. And especially regulatory agencies, a lot of times they won't even take a cup of coffee because of that line. They don't want to get that line blurred at all. I've been in USDA plants I've worked in, and we had free coffee for all of our employees in the break room, and the USDA inspector wouldn't touch it. Same with FDA. But for us auditors, we don't consider it bribing because you're not offering us gifts. You're not saying, hey, a little tit for tat thing, give me this and I'll give you that. But yeah, as far as staying in for lunch, it really helps the process go, because you might take us to a steak restaurant across town. That's a 2-hour thing. So we like to kind of keep the process moving. And if it gets us out of there 10 minutes earlier at the end of the day, it helps everybody out instead of taking a 2-hour lunch in the middle of the day.
Exactly. So always take those things into account. So part of this, and what we wanted to touch on, and we're getting relatively short here on time, but this is two sides, right? We have two sides to this coin. There is being a good client and being a good auditor. So we'll kind of touch on those really briefly here, Brian. So what makes a good client from your viewpoint?
Yeah, a good client. I mean, I consider everybody a good client, but there are some that are challenging, I'll say. But like the ideal client, the ideal audit is whenever we go in there, you have everything prepared. Let's say you walk into the conference room, you have a big table, you have your books out, you have records out, you have all this stuff. Of course, we might ask for something different, but you're prepared for the audit. You're not scrambling. We don't ask for a procedure and you're off for 30 minutes looking for that procedure. When we give you dates for records, those are easy to get. You don't have to spend an hour gathering those records up, and then we're just stuck in the conference room by ourselves looking out the window if you have windows. And then also just you're cooperative. There's no bickering back and forth. It's a professional thing. We try to be professional. I said try. So we have a lot of artists that try to be professional, and we kind of enjoy that back as well. Just friendly discussion, if you will, professional discussion. So I would say that just being prepared is the main thing to successful audit and being a good client.
Right. That's a good point. And remember, if you're disorganized and not able to pull up information and easily answer auditor questions, that's going in their memory bank, right? They're evaluating that and saying, does this plant have a good system or a disorganized system or no system? They're looking at it from that standpoint. So if an auditor asks a question and he says, okay, I would like to see training records. I would like to see training records for 5 individuals from this period of time. And you go, whoop, here you go.
Yeah.
The auditor's like, awesome, right? And then you review the questions and go through that, and he moves on to the next thing. You're making that auditor happy.
Yeah, I mean, that serves two purposes. It helps the process go smoothly, and it might get us out of there on time or a little bit sooner. Or if it's the other way around, where it takes you for an extended period of time to get those records, it will extend the audit, or we won't be able to finish the audit in the duration we have allotted for you, and we have to move on to the next one. So that causes a whole kinds of problems when there's gaps in the audit that aren't finished. So that's why it helps as smooth as possible for everybody.
Right. Any key attributes from your standpoint that make a good auditor?
Yeah, I think someone who just is a good listener, they don't come in there and say, well, I would do it this way, or I would do it that way. They are open-minded. They sit there and they listen to you explain what you have in place. They look at the requirements and see if it fits in. If not, they might ask you further questions about that instead of just, do you have this? And then yes, no, and then that's it. And then they don't take into that open-mindedness whenever you might try to explain it to them. Well, I don't have it exactly like that, but here's what I do. And as long as it meets the intent of the code, it's good. But a lot of, some auditors will say, well, it doesn't say exactly what the code says, so we're moving on. So we look for that. We look for auditors that ask very good questions, not just, do you have this? Yes, no. But tell me about this program. And that helps two things. It helps us identify you have the program. It helps us test your knowledge of the program. And then we'll go look at the program and see what's actually in it to see if you're following your program. So we look for those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's see. Portland's got a question here for us. When can we refocus on compliance and move to quality system maturity to meet FDA direction? Okay. So this is a rhetorical question, but it's a good one in that how do we move on compliance and move to quality systems? So I think what he's saying here is instead of a check the box type thing, we're looking at systems holistically, and that's really the holy grail, isn't it?
I agree. I don't like doing a checklist audit. I don't like going on the checklist, and I tell auditors not to do a checklist audit. Audit the system. What I do is I start in HACCP, for example, food safety, and kind of branch out from there, looking at things along the way. And I tell folks, don't start there. Don't start at question number 1 and go all the way to question number 500 or whatever there is. Start in the middle, kind of jump in and out of the standard as the process takes you. And that helps it flow a lot smoother as well. So I agree. I don't like the checklist type approach. And a lot of retailers are getting to where they don't want a checklist audit either. So that's why, I agree, moving away from that.
Definitely. And it's kind of what we're talking about when we say food safety culture, right? It's not a checklist. It's how do you do things. So let's say it's kind of we're pretty short here, but I definitely want to get this question in for you, Brian. Let's say that I'm a client and I have an audit and the auditor writes me up for something and I disagree. I don't think that the auditor understood and they wrote a deviation and they want a corrective action, but I don't think I have a deviation. What do I do?
Yeah, so quickly. So what you do, if you don't agree with the deviation or any part of that audit, there's a process called an appeals process. And what that means is what it is. You don't agree with a result. You come to the certification body, myself with Eurofins, and you say, I don't agree with this nonconformance. The way the auditor wrote it, I don't agree with what he said. I have it in place. And there's a process that we send you a form. You put what it was, how you feel you're compliant with that requirement. Send along any evidence you have to support your case of why you feel you're compliant. And then we review that with internally, make a decision. Yep, you meet the intent of the code. You don't meet the intent of the code. So anytime any client is welcome to appeal any nonconformance, even if, for example, you fail an audit, you don't agree with that, appeal, it's your right. And the auditor in the closing meeting should tell you what your right is as far as that goes. If you don't agree, there's the appeals process. Here's the appeals process. Here's who you should reach out to. And please, please, please don't just appeal nonconformances because you want a better score. Yeah, that happens. And it's funny. They'll have an 84, for example. They need an 86 not to get a surveillance audit. They'll appeal, 3-4 nonconformances to try to get them over that hump. So don't just appeal to get a better score. Appeal for, a real reason. Because if you just appeal and you cry wolf over and over and over, we're going to kind of catch on to that. So make sure, you actually feel like you meet the intent of the code and that nonconformance was, should not be there.
Well said. Yeah, that tool exists, but it is not a tool to be abused because that will bite you. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So Brian, as we close out here and bring this out to kind of the 30,000 foot level, any closing thoughts or things you'd like to leave with the group today?
Yeah, I guess the only closing thought I could say is, just remember, audits are for continuous improvement for yourselves, for auditors, for everyone involved. And we talked about calibration. It's a calibration for everyone, not just the auditors, not just for you. Just read your materials. You have the test in front of you. You can download the SQF checklist, for example. You have the test. Just be prepared for when that auditor shows up at the door. to make the process go as smoothly as possible. And it also helps reduce the stress in your life. If you know you're prepared, you have the test, you have the answers. So just, it doesn't have to be a hard process or a stressful process. It can go smoothly. So just be prepared and remember, it's for the best. It's continuous improvement. And it should not be a punishment at the end of the day if you get a low score. So hopefully that's not the case. And it is a facility audit, not a quality management audit. It's everybody needs to be involved, as Brian said.
Yes, good point. This is not the quality managers program. This is the plants program. So make sure that that's clear. And to that point, this is a tool to help your plant become better. And that's what we all want. And Wanda mentioned that as well here too. So I think that's a good way to close our chat here for today. So with that, guys, thank you, Brian. Fantastic information.
Thank you.
And hopefully we've given everybody a little peek behind the curtain of what goes on with audits. As you can tell from our chat here today, it's a complicated process. There's a lot that goes on to be able to get that nice little certificate that hangs on your wall at the end of the year. A lot of things have to happen. So with that, thanks everybody. Fantastic input as usual. The participants here on the chat, Sean, like Sean and everybody else here, Brian, that we get on here, absolutely amazing. So thanks everybody. We appreciate it. So with that, we'll close out our chat and we'll see you back here next week at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, where I'll bring another amazing expert on the chat here to provide some enlightenment and answer your questions. But in the meantime, everybody, have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself, and we'll do it all again next week. Thanks again, Brian. Really appreciate it. And thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.